Thank you so much. I just want to express my gratitude for the organizers of this conference. It's incredible that it's hosted here at the UNEP, and I think there's a great future for this conference. And it's also an honor to be here among my colleagues that share my passion for animals. So thank you guys. Before I start off, I want to say I've printed off some of our materials. I've left them here in the front row together with my business cards, and I would really love to hear from folks in this room. If there's any information you want to share about trophy hunting in your own country, if you have questions, please reach out to me. I'll also be covering some specific countries as examples in my presentation. It's not to say that what I'm talking about isn't happening in other countries. It's just that we've done some research on these specific examples, so I'm only signaling them out for that reason. So first, I want to give a broad sort of understanding about the scale of trophy hunting. These statistics cover just threatened taxa, which means they're listed under CITES. So this is really an underestimate of the global trade in trophies. This comes to about 20 to 22,000 trophies traded annually. If you count species that are not CITES listed, it's much more. And I'll wait for the visual to come back. Thank you. And I apologize for this line. I really endeavored to get that out of the presentation, but it'll probably appear on every slide. So the other thing I want to flag is that there are trophies that are not traded and they stay within the country, so this is also not covered. So who are top African exporters? South Africa is number one. You can see here accounting for the threatened taxa trade about 22.6%, followed by Namibia, DRC, Zambia, Mozambique, Tanzania, and other countries. Again, if we talk about species that are not CITES listed, that will change the picture. So why this enormous scale? Well, there are well-funded pro-trophy hunting advocacy groups that are very active at CITES, CMS, Convention on Migratory Species. They are US-based, EU-based. These are some of the examples. They lobby governments to ensure continued existence of trophy hunting. And also they incentivize hunters to increase the number of kills through competitions that offer awards and fancy rings, and maybe you get a crown. So that is what really explodes the scale of trophy hunting. Now, we looked earlier this year at a report from Safari Club International that looked at these 8 countries. And that's why we're focused on them. We did a study with economists at large, and the purpose was to look at, well, show me the money. How much is it really making it into the economies? And so here is what we found. So in green, and okay, good, it appears in full version. In green, you'll see that 17 billion is contributed from tourism to these 8 economies. And then this is how much of that is trophy hunting, less than 1%. Well, what about jobs? 2.6 million jobs from overall tourism, and only about 15,500 jobs, maybe even as few as 7,000 jobs from trophy hunting. So really, what is a sustainable future for wildlife in Africa? So let's set aside the argument about morality, and in my opinion, it is wrong to hunt an animal for fun, to kill an animal for fun. But when biologists look at trophy hunting, they're concerned about sustainability. Is the hunt causing a detriment to the survival of the species? And in order to have a sustainable hunting quota, you need to have an understanding of the population. How many animals do you actually have? And that understanding has to be based on the best available science. So that's the problem. What we're finding is that this is not what's happening in the countries that permit trophy hunting. So let's look at lions in Tanzania. The IUCN assessment of the lion says that in Tanzania, the well-studied areas, Ngorongoro Crater, Katavi, Matembwe, Serengeti, Tarangire, the lion population has been estimated to have declined by 66%. Then you have another study by Hans Bauer, one of the top lion scientists, that says there's a very high probability that the lion population will decline by a further 50% over the next 2 decades. Now, what's happening in Tanzania is that they're questioning the science, this authority, and they're presenting their own numbers that are much higher, and they're basing the hunting quotas on their own inflated lion numbers. And the reason why I say they're inflated is because the current studies are not published. They're not peer-reviewed. And the studies that are happening, for example, there's a Safari Club International funded spore count in Selous. Well, there was no prior spore count, and so you don't have a baseline for the methodologies that you're using. So this really puts the hunting quotas in question. Let's look at elephants in Zimbabwe. There was a study by Muposhi, 2016 et al. They found that the tusk size has been significantly decreasing from 2004 to 2015 in the trophy-hunted elephants in Matetse Safari area. Now that's one really potential key indicator that you don't have sustainable hunting there. The same study also said that hunting quotas for elephants are largely based on previous experiences and things like individual opinions. Well, that's not hard science, that's not peer-reviewed, that's not best available science. And even the elephant management plan that's through 2020, it recognizes significant population declines in Zimbabwe because of poaching in Zimbabwe and mid-Zambezi, and yet trophy hunting continues there. There's no precautionary approach applied to reduce the scale of hunting. I think this is one of the key topics to address in this area. There's corruption and scandal in trophy hunting. And I actually want to start off with a quote from Tanzania's 2012 Minister of Natural Resources and Tourism, Ambassador Kagasheki. He issued a warning to trophy hunters that year when he spoke to Tanzania's Safari Outfitters Association. Here's what he said. "You have a lot of cash, that much I know. Some of you have become sources of bad influence to government officials. Please stop bribing them and let them perform their duties professionally. As a result, some of you have their requests attended quickly, while others have to wait for so long. This is not proper. How come an individual is found in possession of more than 8 hunting blocks under different names? This is unacceptable." So, and what I want to stress are the issues around corruption in Tanzania. For example, what we're finding is that scientists that speak up against trophy hunting and expose corruption are expelled from the country. And their research is replaced by trophy hunter-funded research. This happened with Dr. Craig Packer, and he studied Serengeti lions for many decades. He's been replaced by Dr. Jerry Valent, who's funded by SCI. There's an independent scientist, Dr. Henry Brink, who was removed from studying lions in Selous, one of the key lion hunting destinations. He was replaced by hunter-funded research. And then there's an issue of age limits. You're not supposed to hunt lions over a certain age. Now, the group charged with ensuring that the trophies meet the age requirements is IGF Foundation. Well, what's their number one mission? To safeguard the world's hunting heritage. Talk about the fox guarding the hen house. And in Zimbabwe, I actually want to start with another quote from a news article quoting an NGO representative from Zimbabwe who monitors corruption and transparency. This is what she said. "In the area of conservation, I think the government has behaved like a predatory state, going after big investments, giving them to cronies, family, and really not having any concern for communities that we were talking about that are dependent on that land." So that's one element. Let's talk about Cecil. I can't bring up lions in Zimbabwe without talking about Cecil. I know firsthand from the very scientist who studied Cecil that this hunt was illegal. The prior year, a hunter took a lion that was just over 2 years old. He was still with his mom. And so the government, rightfully so, issued a 0 quota for lions for 2015. So any killing of any lion would have been illegal that year. And further, when the dentist, they were baiting this lion, he was stalking, and he saw another lion come to the carcass first. It was Jericho, who's 11 years old. You know, hunters claim we kill the oldest. He passed that one over. He didn't want that one. He wanted the black mane, he wanted Cecil. So he waited for the younger lion. And so this was an illegal hunt, and yet we have no accountability from Zimbabwe. And lastly, just another example of preferential, sort of like corruption that can happen. There was the Sholotso Rural District, which sold permits for 50 elephants to fund a football stadium. So this is really a shame. The last 2 points I want to make, I just have 2 more slides. There have been multiple import restrictions from the US government, EU government, Australian government, French government, specifically in the EU. And what we're hearing now from trophy hunters and the governments is fear-mongering. What will happen if imports are restricted? And so they're saying, we're going to have vacant hunting blocks, we're going to have reduced responsible management, decreased incentives for community wildlife management, competition from other forms of land use, and increased poaching and human-wildlife conflict. Well, in fact, all of this was happening before any import restrictions were put into place. Hunting blocks were already unviable. In 2012, in Tanzania, 19% of hunting blocks showed no financial profit, and something else was propping them up. Their money was diverted to things like roads and infrastructure. Communities' incentives were extremely low. There is devastating poaching in Tanzania that was there far before any import restrictions, even though they have trophy hunting in place. So it's not really securing these elephant populations. And human-wildlife conflict can be addressed without trophy hunting, as KWCA representative was just talking about. That's not the only solution. So this is key. Trophy hunting hurts tourism, and we're not talking about this enough. In the draft Tanzania 1995 report, it's a Tanzania Policy and Management Plan for Tourist Hunting. They say that national parks are core areas providing wildlife that can be hunted in surrounding areas once it voluntarily moves 1 kilometer outside. So what this tells me is that trophy hunting isn't happening in some remote desert places where tourists don't want to go. They're happening on the outskirts of national parks, and trophy hunters want it that way. And what that can do is deplete the national parks of its wildlife, and then what will happen to tourism there? And stories like Cecil's, they damage brand Africa. They send the wrong message about Africa's wildlife management and government operations and effectiveness. The hunting block areas can be attractive not just for tourism, but also other sustainable alternatives like farming, not in the way that we talked about where you're eliminating wildlife habitat, but trophy hunting doesn't have to be the only alternative. It's worth a discussion. It's not trophy hunting or there will be no land for wildlife. And so I want to leave you with this picture of what countries have which kinds of global bans in place currently, what type of import restrictions exist. And I really want to take this opportunity to commend Kenya and Botswana for its leadership. Kenya, of course, for its long-standing ban on trophy hunting. Botswana has restricted trophy hunting since 2014. These countries must be celebrated, we must be commended, we must be singing this loudly and proudly so we can maintain these restrictions. And also, I hope that will serve as an example for other countries to follow. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I really hope you guys stay in touch with me and pick up the reports that I mentioned. Thank you.